distinguished panel will be taking their seats now. We don't have risers. We decided to opt for the comfortable chairs over the risers. That was probably a mistake. I didn't realize we have all these people. So we're here on the occasion of a talk with William Woodward and friends about the 7 deadly sins. This is really a great opportunity for all of us. We have with us a very distinguished panel. On my left here is Katherine Neville. She's a noted author whose books have been translated into 41 languages. Her first book, The Eight, sold over 9 million copies the first year. I bought one and read it. It's a great book. Or 20. Tiny exaggeration. So we are all anxiously awaiting her next novel, which I understand is it has art and adventure in it, and so we're all looking forward to that. And then we have Clarice Smith. Clarice Smith is an artist. She has exhibited in London, Paris, New York, Washington, D.C., many other places. She's also a noted philanthropist. You may have gone to attend something at the Clarice Smith Center for Performing Arts at the University of Maryland. She started a lecture series at the Smithsonian American Art Museum. She's really important to the cultural life of our city. Most importantly tonight, though, she is a former student of William Woodward, and I'm sure we'll have some interesting observations. And then we come to William Woodward. I came to Washington, D.C. in 1973 and enrolled in the MFA program here at American University. And everybody knew about William Woodward, who was our most illustrious alum, who had been here in the 50s and has gone on to a wonderful career. We mostly knew about you as a landscape painter.
Oh, well, first of all, Mac, I want to thank you for this wonderful book. Do I need this?
Yes.
I want to thank...
You got to talk right into it like
I want
this.
to thank Rasmussen for this opportunity. I never thought I'd ever, when I started out, I never thought I'd ever paint my way into onto the walls of the museum someday. So I feel very happy about it. The show is great. Pictures look better here than they did in my studio. And the lighting and your staff did a great job. So I want to go on record. Thank you from the heart. That was just great. Now, what was your question?
I was just going to get to it. So I'm interested in, I like to start out with trying to understand how an artist becomes an artist. And perhaps you can tell us a little bit about your early experience and your early training to bring you to becoming this very important landscape artist. And then here we are in the middle of something entirely different.
Well, it started a long, long time ago. I started out very innocently, and I'm happy to say that the distance and the mists the haze of time has not muted my memory. When I was a little boy, my father and grandfather were involved in the arts, but they weren't called artists. My grandfather was a sign painter, and my father worked with him, and he was a commercial artist. And when I was just tiny, I was born in 1935 before the war, and they used to drive me down to the National Gallery of Art and watch the National Gallery of Art being built. And later on, when I could roller skate, I used to roller skate from Rhode Island Avenue down North Capitol Street, and the Union Station has those nice mosaic floors, and they're great to roller skate on. And if there were cops around, I would skate through entry foyer of Union Station, raced down Constitution Avenue, checked my roller skates at the desk, and looked at the pictures in the National Gallery of Art. I was totally dazed by it. And I, even sometimes with buddies, we used to skate down to past the National Gallery of Art, take the elevator up to the Washington Monument, and then roller skate down the steps. I didn't tell my buddies about the National Gallery, but everyone knew about the Corcoran in those days, but they wouldn't let any kids in without an adult. And no one in my family or in my neighborhood had ever heard of the Phillips collection. And it was thanks to time, fast forward, I guess 15 years, I got a scholarship to American University thanks to actually two women. One was my high school art teacher. And when I was, in those days, during the war, when I was in grammar school and in junior high school and high school, I had teachers. The teachers were all women. Because I figured, in retrospect, I realized the workforce thing, that was the best job a woman could have, was teaching. So they bring this maternal tenderness, if you will, and a very soft touch to education, although sometimes I got my knuckles rapped for talking too much. Never giving other kids a chance to speak. My report cards always said, Billy talks too much, he never did. But I was the best drawer, and the teachers always asked me to make posters for Valentine boxes or Red Cross posters and things, and which I enjoyed doing very much. And then I got involved in stage sets, and I was able. That was great because I could skip class, especially things like addition, arithmetic, which still like that are. Then I don't know how to go on from there.
Well, Clarice has an important question. Well, one of her important questions is, may we sit down when we speak?
All right. I was fortunate to be one of Bill's students, and he is the most marvelous professor you'll ever have to teach you something. He's most generous in praising others. He'll say to a student, I wish I had done that. Now that's quite something for a professor to say to a young student. Bill, you are extremely knowledgeable about pigments and methods of the old masters. Is there any master's technique that styles you? And who would you have apprentice yourself to if you had lived then?
That's a good question, interesting one. Is there any technique that ever stymied me? No. And I say that with honesty and no false modesty at all, because I love the hands-on technical aspects of art making, whether it's mosaics, tapestries, stained glass, fresco, watercolor, by the way, which is a toy. And you can teach in 20 minutes. I think there are people who spend all semester teaching watercolor. I can teach watercolor in 15, 20 minutes. Just give a few demonstrations, explain about the color, and there are only several alternatives, technical alternatives you can make, that you can list them on the fingers of one hand. But people tend to drag out things that are simple and make them. Often people see simple things. Often when people are confronted with a simple technique or simple things in the world, they see something big. And when people often see something really big, they perceive something small. And I think this is true not just in the arts, but everywhere. It's true everywhere.
Well, we wouldn't he have made a marvelous gestural artist?
Pardon?
You could have made a wonderful gestural artist.
Well, I do think paint manipulation and energy has always excited me. paint handlers, like Sargent, for example. The beautiful brushwork plays a role at the outset. I mean, I think it's intentional. Artists can ask themselves a few questions before even beginning to paint. One question could be, well, apart from how big is the painting, is brushwork going to play a minor or subordinate role in this picture? That's my question. You can ask before you start painting the picture. Other questions are like, is this going to be a light painting or a dark painting? Another question would be, are the edges going to be soft or clean? Not soft or hard, but soft or clear. The hard edge thing is a total misnomer. Critics use it all the time. They're clear edges or soft edges, and sometimes, or you're going to use both. Or just going to interplay. Is the space going to be dark or light? These are all questions that artists ask. And sometimes a particular technique is like a force majeure. It defines the look of the picture, as in egg-tempered painting, for example, that it's continued to the modern period with people like Andrew Weiss. The problem with egg-tempered is it's very hard to paint flesh with egg-tempered because you use a teensy-weensy brush and many strokes. So when Weiss painted the Helga series of the nudes, she looks fuzzy. Her flesh looks fuzzy. It's not the flesh you see of Titian or Rubens, because that very technique made the flesh seem furry, as it were, if you look at it closely. So the technique can control the look of the painting, whether the artist wants to or not. Sometimes the artists have a good idea but use the wrong approach.
What about the medium that the artist uses, for instance?
Well, yes, if it dries fast, you can't manipulate the paint long enough to fuse edges. So in teaching materials and techniques, it was a lot of fun for me because I had to teach myself some of these techniques. And I was really ready to do it because early on here at American University, I took a class with a fellow named Bob Gates. Robert Gates, a wonderful artist. And he taught a course in that subject. Just decided one day that next semester I'll teach that. And the reason I was hired at Portland, because they said, here's a guy who can teach history of materials and techniques. And it's a hands-on course, and it became a required course for art historians because the head of the art department, help me with that. Yes, Dr. Lake, said art historians should have a hands-on experience if they're going to talk about these pictures from the Renaissance or pictures from the early Italian primitives, people like Duccio, Cesare, and so forth. So I taught, in the summer we taught fresco. That was a mess because you used all this plaster, it looked like explosion of paint. Everyone was totally covered with white plaster. It's a hands-on, very messy thing. Rather like serigraphy is also a big mess. It's like doing housework. You spend all your time cleaning up.
I have a question. Of the audience, I'm looking at this audience. How many people in this room are either former students of Woodward or grand students of Woodward? Okay. So a few people are familiar with these techniques. I am too. Could I ask a question based on what Reese was saying? She was asking if there's anyone that you would model yourself after.
Yes.
That you most ever.
Who would you like to apprentice yourself to?
A couple. That's a good question, but it changed.
Wait, one addition. I would like specifically if you had mentioned something about Peter Paul Rubens.
Yes, I'd be delighted to.
Thank you.
When I was a boy going to the National Gallery of Art, there was a big Rubens show that coincided pretty much with the opening of the National Gallery of Art. My dad took me there one Sunday. And Rubens paintings were huge. And I'd never seen nudes that big, that scale. And when you walk up to them, the flesh doesn't look like real flesh. It looks like magic. It looks like there's a luminosity and density, and you can see the blue veins in some parts under the flesh, and it's exquisitely beautiful just as a close-up. From a distance, you go, wow. But when you go up close, you're rewarded. You're not disappointed the closer you get. It gets better the closer you get instead of being sent back. You're rewarded the more you approach the picture. And so that's one wonderful thing about Rubens. I never wanted to imitate Rubens because I got turned off to Rubens here at this university by a wonderful teacher, Sarah Baker, who was one of the women who influenced me the most. She was reading Zen and the Art of Archery. And I started reading Zen. I got fascinated with Japanese calligraphy and the spiritual nature of that art, which is poetic and touching, and made Rubens seem vulgar. All this flesh and all this corporeal stuff seemed very heavy and vulgar compared to the daintiness of a grasshopper painted by a Zen master painter. So I went off on a tangent for a while with people like Morris Graves and West Coast spiritualism. Morris Graves painted a picture called, it was in the Phillips, I think, called The Little Known Bird of the Inner Eye. And it was a crow, just standing there looking, and it was picked up later by people like Leonard Baskin in our own time.
What is that called? I forget the name of that. What is that called, that Japanese?
Sumi.
Sumi.
Yeah, Sumi painting. Yeah, I was fascinated with that in the band. But I memorized a book called The Tao of Painting, or the Mustard Seed Garden Handbook of Painting, something like 1610. I used to quote it to my students because there were wonderful things in it, like 10 things to avoid, advice for the artist. Brush strokes that are bored, stiff, and boardly. Roads with no beginning or end. Trees with less than 4 branches. One mark was great. Devils. And finally, devils taking control of the tip of the brush. The artists I would have apprenticed to would be several. One would have been, and more closer to our own time, would be Oscar Kokoschka, the gorgeous landscape painter whose painting makes you think of Gustav Mahler. As I sleep on the air, the mountains are rising from the earth. That view of Courmayeur, the view of Lyon, with the seagulls occupying that dense sky and the vigor of his brushwork. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful artist. Did you know he taught in Salzburg? And the city of Salzburg does not own one Kokoschka. The Phillips Gallery has some gorgeous ones here. The landscapes, not the figure things he did earlier on when he was married to Alma Mahler. So Kokoschka would have been a person I would love to work with. Also, I would say back in the Renaissance, it would have been Botticelli. I think his line and the poetry and the poetry of his pictures. Think about Botticelli. Think about most art. I think. Beauty is often has a sadness. Botticelli seems to be wistful and sad, and has a tenderness that is lacking, almost 100% lacking in the contemporary world, whether it's in painting or politics or anything else. This tenderness, I think, is very important in Botticelli. I would also another artist earlier among the Italian primitives would have been, I had it to my tongue. Piero di Cosimo. I like eccentric painters. Piero di Cosimo is an exciting painter. And there was one other, it just came and went, but so for modern life it would have been Oscar Kokoschka, a German expressionist, and the total opposite, people like Botticelli and the early Italian. Lorenzetti. Lorenzetti, there's a Lorenzetti angel in the National Gallery of Art. This gorgeous gold background. And the color is so tender. The flesh has maybe 40 shades of pigment. It goes from green to pink to golden, and it's truly a religious picture because it does have this otherworldly aspect. I would have liked to have met him and talked to him, but I don't know if I could study with him because there's not a hell of a lot to the technique. It's just they're colored drawings. All these paintings are prefaced by a careful line drawing, and the rest of it is the colorization of the drawing. But in the case of people like Lorenzetti, Duccio, Frangelico, that whole period, pre-Renaissance Italian painters, the drawing is done, the coloration is done with tiny, tiny, tiny cross-hatching, colored brushstrokes overlapping, and that merge together in the eye, rather like what a computer does with pixels today. Danny Dawson has a question. She's a wonderful painter.
What did you think of the Leonardo?
Leonardo? Where?
It just sold at Christie's for $450.
Oh, I didn't see it.
Anyway, he wouldn't have liked it because it's so loved. Most of it is not Leonardo. I think Bill would have been very disappointed in it. But going back to your love of flesh.
Clarice believes in cutting to the chase.
What?
and bringing it up to date a little bit, how about Lucian Freud that does these marvelous things in the flesh?
You mean the new Lucian Freud, not the...
No, I mean the artist.
Yes.
Not
Well, I was not as impressed by Lucian Freud as other painters because it looked, they said, oh, it's a new thing, it's a new thing. It looks like Jasper Johns. It looks like English painting. The colors are very, very limited, and there's a kind of conceit, I think, to all that impasto. I don't think it adds anything, it just makes the pictures look rougher. You know, it's sort of, it seemed to me, a little conceit or self-conscious rough, let's make it look rough. And over and over and over again, as big, obese men, frontal nude, lying on a pot of guard, which is not the subject matter that I find particularly attractive, or, let me put it this way, attractive is not the right word, life-enhancing. To me, a work of art should be, works of art have to be long-lasting, they have to be life-enhancing. It has nothing to do with style. If you go to the Metropolitan Museum in New York City, and you look at the Egyptian head, it's a colossal head, or to the British Museum, these colossal Egyptian figures are 3,000 years old. They still resonate with this incredible force that gives you the shivers. And I think that's what art should do. Great art should give you a chill. The way, it's the same chill that baseball fans get when someone hits a home run. It can appeal to a mass, or it can appeal to people who don't go to football and baseball games. They get this rush. Everyone goes, crazy, crazy. And it's the same thing internalized when you look at the great work of art, you get a little shiver. If your mind is clear and you're not worried about your parking meter or something, you can't find the restroom in the Louvre.
And you said that it has to have beauty. Something in art has to have beauty.
Well, you see, the word beauty is a bad word today because it implies a soft kind of sappiness, and which is a shame. Because I'm one of these old guys who believes that three things adhere to a work of art: beauty, permanence, and skill. It's unthinkable that in the art world, the arts are the only human endeavor where no skill is involved. It's all about an idea. No, everything's about an idea. I mean, planting petunias is about an idea. It's not the idea that counts. Part of it is art is about more than one thing, not just an idea. Well, that's a cool idea. What was your question? ugly and the impermanent make me want to look the other way. Why? Because we're confronted with ugliness globally. If you look at read the newspaper, who would? To go to a museum is to get away from the burning issues of the day. I was so disappointed to go to the Phillips collection and show about immigration. I read about immigration in the newspaper. I wanted to see the luncheon, the voting party, and show my friends, say something. I don't care about the burning issues of the day. I see it, you can't escape it. I want to get away from it. That's, art is a refuge. Matisse said, a painting needs a good armchair. You sit and relax, feel it, listen to it. And same with music. We need to escape from some of this junk that we're surrounded with. And so, now, what's the question?
You know, you might want to say something about the concert that they did here, because a lot of people here missed the concert.
Right. Last couple of weeks ago, Rasmussen had commissioned a composer, a conductor who commissioned 7 composers, and each one wrote a piece about inspired by one of the paintings. It was great. It was a quintet, and they really got it. I said, how are they going to do this musically? It was a classical quintet, and for Envy, for example, the lady, the soloist on the violin, played beautiful, lyrical, soft music, and the oboe player kept going. The oboe envying the softness, the lyricism of the violin. It was wonderful, and I think they're going to make a tape.
Going to record it. Make it available.
You can actually go to the website and listen to the music. Go to the museum's website. We have the music up online.
Oh, you do? You recorded it?
You were saying that art should move you in some way. And you remember, I always get hungry in a museum when I see things that move me. Now, the chef and the painter both create tastes or scenes from an assortment of base ingredients. One uses salt, pepper, oils, spices, and herbs. The other uses lapis lazuli, lead white, green earth, indigo, ochre, verdigris, and smalt. You enjoy cooking as much as painting and are ardent and proficient in both. Aside from describing oil paint as buttery, how do you equate the sensual experience?
Well, that's part of the joy of the craft, is the sensual properties of the medium. And there's a kind of adoration. Admiration is just the wrong word, but every time I chop celery, I'm amazed that it grows, that it looks like it does, and it comes out of the ground, the color of it, and then all these little leaves go beep, beep, beep around the top. And I've acquired lately a reverence for vegetables. It's become kind of a Zen spiritual thing. And looking at the structure of an onion on all those rings when you slice them, who thought of that? Who made up the celery and the onion? It's amazing. This design, form, and structure in nature is extremely beautiful. And so I've gotten old, as I've gotten older, I'm not as impatient as I was when I was young, and I can put them out just like someone on a cooking show. Now, I never wanted to cook my way into a TV show. The way I never wanted to paint my way into a museum. But the private quietness of cooking is a solitary pleasure, the way painting is. With this business of teaching, I remember that lots and lots of gifted students, very talented students, with lots of good ideas, good technique. But they didn't continue because I figured out why. They couldn't stand the solitude. You have to be able to stay in the room, stay in the studio by yourself, and not talk to anybody all day long, day after day after day after day. When I painted the circus mural for Ringling Brothers, that's now down in the Museum of Sarasota, I spent 2 years on a scaffold by myself, except now and then a couple of students would come by and play with the picture, play with me a little bit on it. And luckily I didn't have to retouch all that we had done. But by and large, it was totally solitary. I didn't speak to another human being. So at night, when I cleaned up at night, I wanted to go out and make merry, and meet people, talk to them, party, drink, meet women, eat good food. No. And sometimes I was just too tired, so you go on in this, but you can't, it's hard to lock yourself up unless you can look forward to something when the work is done. So my general behavior or calendar would be work like hell for a year or so. Don't take weekends off. They're forgettable. What you last week? I can't remember. Work. Then take a whole year off. Then you can have another kind of adventure. You can see the world. You can go to Indonesia. You can go to. I mean, this quest for adventure has been a very important part of my life, and still is.
Would you go back for a second to what you were saying about form and structure, because you do that workshop in the Natural History Museum, form and structure and nature and art.
Oh, right, yeah. Well, one of the things that's important about, I started talking about permanence a minute ago. I never finished the point. Why does permanence matter? Permanence matters in art simply because we can see the hand of the past reaching into our present. And that hand tells us, this is what our world was like. These are the things we believe in. These are the things that were important to us. These are the things that moved us. That is why it's important. Because we have the past reaching into our present to inform us of these wonderful things that would help us forget the quotidian activities like, gosh, I got to paint that grill or something like that. Our heads are filled with trivia. And it's a quicksand of trivia. The whole world is sinking into. The focus is on trivia. The focus is not on the noble achievements of the human spirit. It's on what is really important. Just one quick aside. Last November 9th was the date of the fall of the Berlin Wall. Huge deal in history. Huge deal. End of the Second World War, Berlin Wall falls, communism finito. Not one television station mentioned that. Of 1900 in New York City. Well, what did they mention? What was dominating the news day after day after day? A very trivial matter compared to something like the Berlin Wall. So why bother mentioning this? Because it has affected the psyche of the audience. It's affected the psyche of everyone. Our mind fills us up with trivia instead of leaving us to kind of a spiritual room we can walk in, or to dream in. What's a dream? A dream is a movie. Everyone has a little movie projector in their skull. It's something that can happen. All of a sudden, push a button, and you can run a movie in your skull, which is called simply imagination. Imagination. It's an image that you can go dig. And people call that. Imagination is not a strong enough word. It doesn't. I'm sure we can find a substitute for it.
Well, you're talking about movies, and movies involve lenses. Have you ever used a camera obscura or a camera receiver?
You hear the question? No, I've never used a camera obscura. I never needed to. People make a big deal out of it, but especially things like Premiere. I thought cameras themselves, and photography has played a very significant role. in my work. But painting from a photograph as such smells, the painting when it's done smells like a photograph. It's something that kind of painting doesn't interest me, the photographic realism. Someone has a question.
Could you take three paintings? Okay, what I learned from you was composition. Could you explain to us, just take three paintings, how you compose them and why you compose them that way?
Can you repeat the question? Can you repeat the question for the recording?
Oh, the question was, well, you taught us composition,
And every one of these
and
paintings.
how did you pose the figures?
No, not pose them, but your compositions are incredible. And what I learned from you when I was young is composition.
Oh, thanks. I'm glad. You're a very good artist. You were already a great artist before you came to me. You had
No, I
already.
was not. But what I learned from you was how to put things together. And I think that if you took two paintings and explained how you put them together, that would really help a lot of my students who are in the audience.
Oh, great.
All right, I'll be happy to.
Repeat the question.
Just one more handout.
I just wondered if you could give us still time. Would you give us a little background first?
About the paintings, yes. I guess Doc was going to ask that question. Well, I never gave it a chance, I'm sorry.
But I was going to actually say that you had talked about the artists that had influenced you, but you haven't mentioned Fellini yet.
Oh, I mentioned, yeah, these pictures.
And that kind of brings us to
These pictures, movies, played a huge role in influencing my vision, especially filmmakers like Kurosawa, Fellini, and others that are loved by all of you. The spirit of the films of Fellini influenced me very much. And the subject matter of these paintings came right after I finished the circus mural that is now in Sarasota, down in Sarasota. After I finish the circus, I'll take those compositions. These all, obviously no one posed for these pictures, they're all made up. The compositions, i.e. are made up. The individual elements are based on real things, and sometimes even they are made up. To work out the composition, the reason for these drawings is to tell me what it is, what can the picture possibly look like. As you can see, there's a difference between the drawing of Sloth, with the man on the Galapagos turtle, which is actually a self-portrait, by the way. I took a picture of myself in a chair. I have some costumes in my studio with that curly wig on, and made myself be the model because I'm handy. I don't have to hire someone and get them to come over to the studio. The monkeys came from a book published by the European Primate Institute and others that I found in the library. And I would play just for the anatomy of the monkey, and then I could play with the faces, like change the mouth and what have you. So none of these are actually based on real things. These two faces, one on the right is a man who collects minerals, by the way. And the one on the left was my studio assistant. And I had faces in different spots, but sometimes to get the composition right, you do a beautiful head, nice with one face, but it's the wrong place. Composition, so you have to wipe it out and redraw. I got sick of that, so I started cutting them out. Back there, and so I could shift them around, put them in the proper place so I could adjust the compositions by actually shifting the drawings around. And this painting, here's a picture that went a huge change. It started with the drawing over there, with the wing, the dancers came up, this ended, the Envy, by the way, according to St. Thomas Aquinas, is a feeling of sadness that you somehow are suffering because of another person's gifts or abilities. So I had this sad-looking figure from a photograph. I took a picture of her. And the dog is from a picture of a dog in a dog book. And the monkeys from Yerkes Primate book. And she was envious of flight. She's earthbound, and she envies flight. I started drawing people having possessions, so we have a whole bunch of Mercedes and cars and people. It became too materialistic and too obvious. The problem with painting the seven-day sins is simply that if they're too obvious, they're sophomoric, and if they're too esoteric, no one will understand what the hell you're doing. So that's why it took me 20 years to do these pictures. And I meant to finish them all for the year 2000. The human condition at the end of the 20th century. I said to myself, that is baloney. Cut it out. It's pretentious. Do something in the tradition of Fellini, Chaplin, and introduce the comedic vein into it. But you can paint it in a serious way. Paint them like Caravaggio would do it, old masters with no paint handling, obviously. None of my favorite painters like Sargent would do it in an old master way, just for the fun of it. To amuse myself. And I knew it would be hard, and I wanted to do something that is harder than I usually can do. I got very comfortable with mentioning landscape painting. But they're too easy. It was too easy for me, and I wanted to do something more challenging. I wanted to, like painting a mural, I wanted to break out of my comfort zone and try something. This will paint the same damn picture over and over and over and over and over again ad nauseum, the way so many artists do. They get branded. This is my brand, I have to stick to it. It happens to actors. I didn't want to get typecast as a painter of landscapes or paint in a certain way. I wanted to branch out and do something I wasn't sure I could do. It's more engaging. And when you succeed, you have this personal feeling of elation, I would say a heightened sense of being. You feel, out of that. It's like breaking your frame of reference. And when I taught little kids, there would be children who could draw a really good horse. Could draw the same horse over and over and over, side wheels. And a guy named Victor Lowenfeld, who taught art as education. I wrote a book called Art as Education that I was fascinated by when I was young. Still at AU, as a matter of fact. Sarah Baker introduced me to that book. And Lowenfeld talked about the frame of reference and how it's a security thing, because kids like it. Because, you're such a good drawer, you love this horse, draw us the horse, draw a horse for you. So the child would keep drawing the same horse over and over and over again. My challenge as a teacher was to make them draw a different horse. How about, what else do horses do? Do they jump? Yes. Well, why don't you try jumping those? Do they eat? Yes. How about a horse walking away? How about a horse coming forward? How about horses fighting? How about lions? How about tigers? How about the whole animal kingdom? So they branch out from that frame of reference and stop drawing the same thing over and over and over again. That should have been taught to Bernard Buffet, the French painter who was so stylish, with all these black lines, and all these stupid clowns, and all these street branches, and little color washed in over and over and over and over, and he painted himself out of favor. The way this happens a lot. It happened in the Renaissance with Perugino. Pietro Perugino was painted in the National Gallery of the 3 crosses, and the figures standing beside the crosses are the same figure. He had a template. He would trace that figure. The drapery is exactly the same, the poses are the same, and I mean, it became a formula that he was eventually criticized for by some monks who read about it. They said, all his figures look like twins. So we're not going to commission him anymore.
Would you consider doing anything with computer art?
Well, I was back into the computer world, kicking and screaming. When I was teaching at GW, all of a sudden I came to the office one day, there's a big computer at my desk. I can't even type. So I had a little prejudice there before I had to learn how to use this machine. Here's what happened. It all goes back to two things: the invention of the wheel. Things started going down with the invention of the wheel, and the internal combustion engine. I sound like a Luddite, but I'm really not. Electricity is an artificial source of power. What are you going to do when the power grid goes out? You can't use the computer. I had a friend who bought an ocean racing yacht, and he had all this electronic gear on it. And it worked great with like course computers and this and that. He gets out, as soon as you get outside of land, everything broke down. So you have to learn how to navigate on your own. You need to, I'm putting too much emphasis on this, but the problem with electricity is it destroyed, neon science destroyed sign painting. My grandfather said, these electric signs are going to put good old sign painter out of business. And they did. And they did. And there are no sign painters anymore. My grandfather was an inspiration to me as a boy because he would draw a line with a pencil on a piece of sheet metal that they nailed to frames. There was a wood shop in his studio, and I used to watch him paint every day. Every single day. I come home from school, watch my grandfather paint. And I was lucky to, go back to this electric his hand was like a machine. He would draw a line from the top, a line from the bottom, and the letters in between with a quill brush, a very, very soft brush, this chisel point. And it was like watching a machine. The curves were perfect. O's were great. W's, thick and thin letters. He could do Spencerian script. He painted Coca-Cola signs. And I grew up in that environment with my dad and my granddad, and not only did they take it to the National Gallery, but they gave me brushes and paints and things, and I painted with them and did the carpentry to build signs. And they would, when I'd come home from school, my teacher said, would I paint a sign for the football game or something? And I said, Grandpa, would you mind painting because your letters are much better than mine? And he would begrudgingly often help me out like that, and doing props in school play and so forth. So I had wonderful, wonderful support from a family that was very affectionate and encouraging, and I was very lucky because we didn't have television until I was 14. So there was no electric entertainment in the house. We used to love to go to the movies. And my dad would take me to see Bogart and John Wayne, Treasure of Sierra Madre, a great movie I'll never forget. And then we were reading Hemingway, The Snows of Kilimanjaro. When I grew up, I said, I want to have adventures. I want to go to Kilimanjaro. I want to go to South America. I want to go to China. And that spirit of adventure is staying with me, and
so you're leading right into the question I was going to ask a little farther down the pike, but I feel like I need to ask it now about narrative. All your famous murals, your narrative art obviously came from this exposure to traveling all over the world, living all over the world, and painting inside other mirrors all over the world. But you are most known probably for the historic murals, the circus mural. But the one mural I wanted you to start with, because I think it's the most fun story, is the Clyde's murals. Back to flesh.
What about the Clyde's murals? I don't know if you know about it, but Ben Forgy was very complimentary. Ben Forgy, I see him in the audience. Critic for the Washington, great, wonderful, intelligent guy. Thanks, man, for coming. Great to see you. So happy you're here. Billy. Well, the Clyde's murals. Well, first of all, a word about murals. Murals differ from easel painting in many fundamental ways. First of all, they're designed for an ambulatory spectator instead of a stationary one. You walk by the mural. Second, They are an adventure and satisfy a lust for adventure. Why are they an adventure? Because you break out of this frame of reference of doing the same kind of painting over and over and over again that you're comfortable with, and have a challenge. Oh, I wonder if I can do this. One, size is daunting. Two, I'm not familiar with the subject matter. I've not painted 45 frolicking nudes and landscapes before. But what fun that would be. And as you get into it, you become, as you step out of your frame of reference to a traditional way of painting, written in landscapes, that sort of thing, beach scenes, cafes, which I still love and admire and look at. But to do these figures was a test. I was able to test myself. And to listen to the people who commission the work, sometimes they have better ideas than you do. Often artists say, oh gee, I've got to commission the client, so stupid, da da da. And most historically, the patron has a great idea. Sistine Chapel, for example, great idea by a patron. He said, Michelangelo, here's an idea. Can you do this, and that? And he had an adventure. He rose to the challenge. The scale is also the physicality of it all, which is, you talked about the sensual nature of the paint and the material. You take a big, big brush, a large canvas, long like this, and then the hard part, of course, is you have to clean out the brush. So the scissors can be handy, but they're scarce. And sometimes you can be too busy keeping him busy so that you don't get work yourself. So it's better off sometimes, I think, better off to work alone than in a company.
So we need to open it up for questions in a minute. So could you just wrap up and tell us a little about how you came to paint? That was your first major.
Slides was my first big commission. Yeah, it was 50.
You got it.
75 feet by something.
72 feet.
And I hired some girls like that. We called girls back then. Young women. Miss Pennsylvania was extraordinary, beautiful woman, and very, very frisky and fun. And she had girlfriends. And they said, let's pose for Billy's mural. So I got a big piece of black nosine paper. I rented some spotlights. I had two guys with cameras, and I said, okay, dance around, hold hands, front view, side view, back view, da da da, click, 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 click. Took dozens and dozens of black and white photographs, and then made drawings, assembled them together, and invented the compositions. And so the figures need to interlock, they need to overlap, which actually saved the murals. Because last year, they tore down Clyde's, and we're going to cut the murals up in small pieces and try to sell fragments. But they couldn't, because if you cut one figure, you wound up with the arm of another one and threw it into the composition. So you couldn't extrapolate a figure from the composition because they're all interlocked. Anyway, Ben Forgy wrote an article about the paintings. He said, is it a restaurant, is it an art gallery, or both? And then I can't paraphrase you, that was about 30, 40 years ago. And they were inspired by the paintings by Howard Chandler Christie at the Café des Artistes up in New York. They're still there.
And those are just
been restored. The Café des Artistes is now called, what's it called, remember?
Leopard at Des Artistes. From Leopard.
Well, it's not open for lunch. I'm trying to get in. I was in New York last week and take a look at them. But Howard Chandler Christie didn't do compositions. He did vignettes. He did a lot of foliage and little girls picking out of the bushes and things. But they weren't unified compositions. So, to compose the murals kept them from being destroyed. They couldn't cut them up. And they have been subsequently rescued and cleaned. The adventure part is really, I cannot emphasize enough, the excitement and the feeling of being alive when you are living through this kind of adventure of creating something you yourself have never seen before, and neither has anybody else. something, that's originality, to do something no one's ever seen before, including you.
So we should open it up to the audience a little bit and have them ask some questions before we hit the line. Is there anybody who'd like to ask a question? Don't be bashful.
Ben has a question.
Well, an observation first. It's been a lot of fun. All these years, long, long ago, sounds like too long ago. It's still fresh in your mind, isn't it?
Oh, yes.
Anyway, my question is, your work seems so aleatoric, and yet it is involved and carefully planned. You talk about composition, and then you talk about surface and paint movement and movement of figures. How does that work out in your mind? I mean, are you conscious of it, or by now has it become second nature? But the combination of imagination, improvisation, and preconception.
Well, there's a tremendous amount of editing. Even not just in these murals and complex compositions involving overlapping figures. The editing process happens preferably in drawing because they're easy to trash or modify and start another version. For example, I did 2 versions of that sort of thing. I just distracted myself. Ask the question one more time.
I'm just talking about, just looking at your works, there's a big combination of things, and I wonder how they come together. Preconception, planning, imagination, and then in the execution, this wonderful bravura, which seems like improvisation.
I restrained the bravura in these pictures. I tried to make them more controlled and more old masterish, and more traditional looking. That was the conscious decision based on, not an original idea of mine, but I read that Thomas Mann, when he wrote The Confessions of Felix Krull, a confidence man, said he wanted to combine the aristocratic milieu with the criminal milieu in a comedic way. And I said, these could be painted seriously, but be entertaining and slightly wry and amusing simultaneously. That happened initially. The pictures fluctuated back and forth. The conscious decision to make the change from that ballerina to this particular painting, which is the darkest of all the pictures, not very funny, was partly inspired by the poem of William Blake, The Sick Rose. And I quoted it in the catalog with Jack and I were talking about it. Years ago I read it, and I never forgot it. And it goes like this. O rose, thou art sick. The invisible worm that flies in the night in the howling storm has found out that red back bed of crimson joy, and his dark secret love doth thy life destroy. The worm is envious of the rose. The worm is earthbound. The worm is envious of flight, the bird. And by making a little worm, make the worm morph into a dragon. And the sick rose is implied by the things at the bottom, the details in the margins of the painting. That was the way I could express envy, because the sick rose, the worm that flies in the night has found out thy red of crimson joy, and his dark secret love doth thy life destroy. It's like cancer, seeing something beautiful and wonderful, and it hates it, it destroys it. It's a kind of envy. The dog with the bone, he doesn't want no one else to have it either. There's an anger involved in envy and a feeling of sadness. So these things were conscious decisions. The exciting part, once you make the decision, then you've got to materialize it. You've got to give it form. And that is what's so engaging. It's not fun. It's enjoyable, but it's really engaging and very frustrating. So that's why it took me 20 years, because I didn't like, I had actually painted the wing. The wing there was actually painted there. That's under all this. Dancing figures under. There are other figures in this painting too. And I took them out. It's my picture now, I can do whatever I want with it. If I want to paint it out, I'll paint it out.
Could I just mention the word bravura that he used? Rob Liberace used to say in his classes that I was in, this Woodward, he could paint alla prima faster than anybody I've ever seen. There was paint all over him and all over the room, but he finished the painting like that. It was perfect. Did you comment on that?
Well, I didn't. That's fun. It's a lot of fun. I still enjoy that kind of work. Ben Fortney once said, on this group show I was in, and my friend Frank Wright, who unfortunately is not here tonight, wonderful artist, Frank said, you got to stay in Washington. You can't keep running off around the world having adventures. You got to, other people are going to forget about you. I'm having a show, there's going to be a show. And so I called my wife back in the States. I said, take one of those pictures to the gallery. It's the gallery on P Street. And Ben said, didn't mention Frank was in the show too. Didn't mention Frank. He said, I was overseas. And I laughed and Ben said, and William Woodward retains the title as the fastest brush in the East. As the fastest gun in the West. And this excitement of paint happening and the way paint behaves. There's a beautiful show of abstract paintings right over there by 3 women. The joy of paint manipulation has its own satisfaction. It brings tremendous satisfaction, the way paint behaves. And the lady over there, what's her name, John? Anne Marchand. Boy, oh boy, you can see the joy of the way, just watching paint behave the way it does. That is valuable for its own sake. As far as it goes, it's worthwhile, valuable for its own sake. The way paint behaves and the sensuous nature of it. Look at de Kooning. De Kooning was very exciting painting to look at. And the violence of it. And so art, to me, does all these wonderful things. It can be soft and tender, and it can be brutal and robust. If you look at Rembrandt's painting, you'll see moments of extreme tenderness and great delicacy, and come in the same painting with brutal brushstrokes that took a second. So this combination of strength and sensitivity, I think, that makes art so important, beautiful to us. The way I talked about those those giant monumental, brutal-looking pharaohs. If you look at their hieroglyphs, each little grasshopper, each little bird, so tremendous sensitivity. It's not brutal. It's not domination. It's a tremendous delicacy to it.
Are there any other questions? I do want to let Bill sign some catalogs here, and want him to be able to have a glass of champagne.
I want to thank all of you for coming. I'm very touched. It means a lot.
Bill's love of life, his reverence for the past, but his joie de vivre, and he continues to grow and experiment and do things. That's why this old man appears so young.
Thanks.
Stuff that's got to get out. It's just
doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that much to me. It used to. I used to want everything signed, but thrilling but exhausting. He's so freaking arrogant that we routed school enough to him to grab his place. And I was just looking at his, and I pulled out a couple books, which I know, and he pushed out, remember?